The nurse handed me a folded note as I walked out of my wife's hospital room. I didn't know her. I'd never seen her before in my life. She pressed it into my palm without making eye contact, then turned and walked away down the corridor like nothing had happened. I stood there in the hallway, the smell of antiseptic and floor wax hanging in the air, and I looked down at the note. 4 words. She is not Eleanor. I almost laughed. I thought it was some kind of mistake meant for someone else. My wife had been in that room for 11 days. 11 days of me driving 40 minutes each way from our house in Denton, bringing her the crossword puzzle she liked. The green grapes, not red, always green. 11 days of talking to doctors who spoke to me in careful, measured sentences, the way people talk to someone who might break. I folded the note back up and put it in my jacket pocket and went in to sit with her. She was asleep. She looked the same as she always did when she slept, mouth slightly open, one hand curled near her chin. The monitors beeped. The blinds were half open, and the afternoon light came in at an angle across the foot of the bed. I sat in the chair beside her and I thought about the note. She is not Eleanor. Eleanor, my wife of 31 years, the woman who burned toast every single morning and never once apologized for it. The woman who cried at commercials, not movies, always commercials, something about the music. The woman whose handwriting I could pick out of 1,000 samples, whose laugh I could hear from 2 rooms away, whose hands I knew better than my own. I told myself the nurse was confused. Mixed up rooms, mixed up patients. It happens in hospitals. It had to be that. But I didn't throw the note away. I found the nurse the next morning. I had to wait near the station at the end of the hall for almost 20 minutes before I spotted her. Dark hair pulled back, maybe 40, maybe a little younger. Her name badge said Jill. She was carrying a chart and moving fast, and I stepped into her path in a way that I'm not proud of, but I didn't know what else to do. I said, "I think you gave me something yesterday." She looked at me, just for a second. Then she looked back down at the chart in her hands. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, 4 words. "She is not Eleanor. You handed it to me right outside room 214. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said very quietly, without looking up, "Go to the records office on the 3rd floor. Not the main one, the small one at the end of the East Wing. Ask for the admissions file from March 14th. Tell them you're family." I said, "I'm family. She's my wife." Jill finally looked at me. Her expression was something I didn't have a word for. Not pity exactly, something more complicated than pity. She said, "I know. That's why I gave you the note." Then she walked away. I didn't go to the records office that morning. I went back to room 214 and I sat with my wife and I held her hand and I watched her breathe. She woke up around noon and she smiled at me the way she always did, a little crooked on the left side, and she asked if I had brought the crossword. I had. I always did. We sat there for 2 hours doing the crossword together, the same way we had done it 1,000 times before. She was better at the pop culture ones. I was better at geography. She always wanted to do the clues out of order, which drove me crazy, which she knew, which was exactly why she did it. When I left that afternoon, I kissed her on the forehead and I told her I loved her. She said, "I love you too, old man." And I went to the East Wing. The records office at the end of the East Wing was not much more than a room. Small window, 1 clerk, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. The clerk was a young man, couldn't have been more than 25, and he looked surprised to see me, like people didn't come there much. I told him I was family. I told him I wanted to see the admissions file from March 14th. Patient name, Eleanor Marsh. He hesitated. He said he wasn't sure he could release that without authorization from the attending physician. I said, "I'm her husband. I've been coming here every day for 11 days. I have power of attorney. I have it right here in my wallet if you need to see it. He looked at the power of attorney. He looked at me. He looked back at his computer screen for a long time. Then he printed something and slid it across the counter without saying a word. I picked it up. The admissions form from March 14th had my wife's name on it. Eleanor Marsh, date of birth, home address, everything correct. Primary emergency contact, me. Husband. That part was right. But under insurance, the policy number was wrong. I knew our policy number. I'd been reciting it to people for 11 days. This was different by 3 digits. And under next of kin, beside my name, there was a second name I did not recognize. Daughter, Vanessa Cook. We don't have a daughter. We never had children. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time before I could make myself move. The form was on the passenger seat. I kept looking at it and then looking away, like if I didn't look directly at it, it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. Daughter, Vanessa Cook. I tried to think logically. Clerical error. Someone else's information attached to the wrong file. The hospital was a big place, hundreds of patients. It happened. That was the explanation. That was almost certainly the explanation. I drove home. I made dinner, which I didn't eat. I sat in the living room in the chair by the window, the one I always sit in, and I looked at the street outside going dark, and I thought about 31 years. Eleanor and I met at a hardware store in 1993. I know how that sounds. But she was there buying a deadbolt lock because she had just moved into her first apartment and she wasn't sure the one on the door was good enough. I helped her pick one. I installed it for her the following Saturday. I asked her to dinner on the Sunday after that. She said yes. She always made it sound like she had done me a favor. 31 years. 1 house. 3 dogs. All of them gone now. No children, not because we didn't want them, but because it didn't happen. And eventually we stopped waiting for it to happen, and we built a life that was ours, just ours, and it was enough. More than enough. I thought about all of it sitting in that chair, and I thought about the name on the form. Vanessa Cook. At 11 o'clock at night, I opened my laptop. It took me a while. I'm 63 years old, and I did not grow up with the internet, but I know how to use it. I started with the name, Vanessa Cook. Too common. Too many results. I added the city, our city. I tried different combinations. I found a Facebook page, private, mostly, but the profile photo was visible, the way they sometimes are, and I leaned close to the screen and I looked at it. Young woman, maybe 30, blonde hair, which meant nothing, but her eyes looked like Eleanor's. I told myself I was seeing things. I told myself I was a tired old man sitting in the dark at 11 at night staring at a stranger's photo on the internet and projecting something onto it that wasn't there. I closed the laptop. I didn't sleep. I called my daughter-in-law the next morning. My son, Philip, lives in Colorado with his wife, Tamara, and their 2 kids, and Tamara has always been the one in the family who knows things. She's a paralegal. She knows how to find information. She knows how to ask the right questions. I told her what I had found, the form, the name, the insurance number. There was a silence on the line. Then Tamara said, "Dad, do you want me to come?" I said, "Not yet. Just tell me how to find out if this is real." She walked me through it. County records, birth records, marriage records. She told me what to search, in what order, and she stayed on the phone with me while I did it. And when I found it, she heard my breathing change before I could say a word. Eleanor Margaret Marsh, date of birth matching exactly. 1 prior marriage, dissolved, 20 years before she and I met. 1 child, a daughter. Relinquished for adoption, closed record. Vanessa. I don't remember driving back to the hospital. I know I did it because I got there. I remember parking. I remember the elevator. I remember the hallway and the smell and the sound of the monitors getting louder as I got closer to room 214. She was awake. She had the television on. One of those game shows she liked. the one with the wheel. She looked up when I came in, and she started to smile. She stopped when she saw my face. I sat down in the chair. I put the papers on my knee. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "Eleanor, I need you to tell me about the baby." The color left her face so fast it frightened me. She looked at the papers on my knee. She didn't ask me how I found out. She didn't ask me what I was talking about. She just looked at the papers, and then she looked at the window, and she was quiet for a very long time. Finally, she said, "I was 19. I was alone. His family had money and mine didn't, and they made it very clear what the options were." I said, "You never told me." She said, "I couldn't. I tried. Twice. The first year we were married, I sat across from you at the kitchen table, and I had the words right there, and I couldn't say them. I was ashamed. Not of her. Of everything else. Of what happened, and what I let happen, and what I didn't fight hard enough to stop." She was crying. I don't think she knew she was crying. She said, "I looked for her. 15 years ago, I found an agency that helped with closed adoptions, and I went through the whole process, and I found out she was alive and she was okay, and that was all I let myself have. I thought she'd had a good life, and I didn't have the right to walk into it and turn it upside down." I said, "She put herself on the admissions form as next of kin." Eleanor looked at me. I said, "She found you." I don't know what I felt sitting in that room. I have tried to sort it out since then, and I'm still not sure I have the right words. I was angry. That's true. Not at Eleanor exactly. Or maybe at her a little, but more at the situation, at the years, at the idea that there was this entire piece of her that I had been beside for 3 decades and not known. But underneath that I was something else, something quieter. Because I thought about a 19-year-old girl alone and frightened and making the only choice she thought she had. I thought about what that costs a person. I thought about carrying that for 40 years, carrying it every day, sitting across the breakfast table from someone you love and not being able to say it. I reached over and I took her hand. She looked at me like she was waiting for something bad. I said, "Do you want to meet her?" She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, I wanted that for 40 years. Tamara found Vanessa's phone number. I'm still not entirely sure how. She said it involved a few different databases and she preferred not to get into specifics, which is a very Tamara answer. I made the call myself. Eleanor asked me to. She said she wasn't sure she could do it without her voice giving out entirely, and she wanted the first words to be steady. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. I said, "My name is Ted Marsh. I'm Eleanor Marsh's husband." Silence. Then a voice, careful and careful and careful. "Is she okay?" I said, "She's gonna be okay. She asked me to call you." Another silence. Longer. I said, "She wants to meet you, if you want that too." The sound that came through the phone then was not quite a word. It was something earlier than a word. She said, "Yes, I've been trying to figure out how to ask." Vanessa came 4 days later. She drove from Indianapolis 3 hours, and she arrived in the late morning, and I met her in the lobby because Eleanor had asked me to walk her up. She was smaller than I expected. Dark coat, good shoes, carrying a paper bag that she was gripping in both hands. Her eyes were Eleanor's eyes. No question now, no projecting, clear as anything. She looked at me and she said, "You're Ted." I said, "I am." She said, "Thank you for calling me." For not, she stopped, for just calling. I said, "Of course." We rode the elevator in silence. I didn't try to fill it. Some silences are doing something important. Outside room 214, Vanessa stopped. She put her hand on the wall. She said, "I've been preparing for this for a long time, and now I can't remember a single thing I was going to say." I said, "You don't have to say anything. Just go in." She said, What if she's disappointed? I said, she cried for an hour after I told her you were coming. Not sad crying, the other kind. Vanessa looked at me. She took a breath. She went in. I waited in the hallway. I sat in one of those chairs they have along the wall, the uncomfortable kind, and I sat there for a long time. I could hear voices inside, but not words. At one point, I heard something that might have been laughing. Eventually, Philip arrived. He had driven down from Denver with Tamara when I told him what was happening. They came down the hall together, and Philip looked at me and said, "Dad, you okay?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's a real answer or a dad answer?" I said, "Somewhere in between." Tamara sat down beside me, and she put her hand over mine, and she didn't say anything, which was exactly right. We sat there together in that hallway, the three of us, while inside the room my wife met her daughter for the first time in 40 years. I thought about all the ways a secret can live inside a person, how it doesn't just sit there quietly, how it shapes things, bends things, takes up space in ways you can't always see. I thought about all the conversations Eleanor and I had at that kitchen table, all the evenings, all the years, and I thought about what she had been carrying and how much it must have weighed. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt something closer to grateful that she had told me, that Vanessa had found her, that this was happening now, before it was too late, in a hospital room with afternoon light coming through half-open blinds. Eleanor came home 2 weeks later. Vanessa came back for it. She drove the 3 hours again, and she helped me bring the bags down to the car, and she and Eleanor sat in the back seat together the whole way home while I drove, and I could hear them talking, but I kept the radio low so I couldn't quite make out the words. That was intentional. Some things are not mine. We had dinner that night, the four of us, me, Eleanor, Philip, and Vanessa. Tamara had the kids. She'd figured we needed something smaller that first night. We ordered pizza because Eleanor said she had been dreaming about pizza for 2 weeks, and nobody argues with a woman who just got out of the hospital. We sat around the dining room table, and we ate, and we talked, and at some point during the evening, Vanessa said something that made Eleanor laugh so hard she had to put down her glass, and the sound of it filled the whole room. I have heard that laugh 10,000 times. I could have listened to it for 10,000 more. I'm not telling you this story because it has a clean ending. I'm telling it because it almost didn't happen at all. If Jill, the nurse who pressed that note into my hand, had decided it wasn't her place, if she had looked the other way, if I had thrown the note away without reading it or read it and done nothing, this would have ended differently. Eleanor is cancer-free. That part I should have said earlier. The tumor they found in early March was small, caught soon enough, and the doctors used the word excellent when they talked about her prognosis, and I have turned that word over in my hands every day since, like a coin I don't want to spend. But there are 2 months I spent at that kitchen table not knowing there was something my wife was carrying alone, something that was eating at her in a different way than the thing in her chest, something that had been eating at her for 40 years. And I would have sat there not knowing for the rest of our lives if a stranger in a hospital hallway hadn't decided that the truth was worth more than her own comfort. I never found out why Jill did it. I went back and tried to thank her properly, and I was told she had transferred to another department. They wouldn't say which one. Maybe she had her own reasons. Maybe she just believed that people deserve to know the people they love. Whatever it was, I'm grateful. Vanessa comes for dinner now about once a month. She and Eleanor are still figuring out what to call what they are to each other. It's too big for any of the usual words, and they're not in a hurry to find one. Last month, she brought her husband. Good man. He shook my hand and called me Ted, and then looked embarrassed, like he wasn't sure if that was right. I said, Ted is fine. He said, okay, Ted. We watched the game together. He doesn't know much about football, which I'm going to have to fix, but that's a project I'm looking forward to. 31 years with the woman I love, and she still had a whole world inside her I hadn't seen yet. That used to feel like something I'd missed. Now it feels like a gift I didn't know I was going to get. I keep thinking about Jill, a woman I spoke to for maybe 90 seconds total across 2 brief hallway encounters, who will probably never know what she set in motion. She had no obligation to hand me that note. It wasn't her marriage. It wasn't her secret to carry or to give away. She could have looked the other way and gone home that evening and slept fine, but she didn't. And because she didn't, Eleanor got to put down something she had been carrying for 40 years. That's the thing about doing right by someone. It almost never cost you nothing. Jill risked her job, or at least her comfort, to tell the truth to a stranger. Eleanor risked the marriage she had built to finally speak a truth she had buried. Vanessa risked rejection, the worst kind, the kind where the person you've been searching for turns out to be disappointed you exist. Every time she tried to find her way back to a mother she never got to keep. Every good thing in this story came from someone deciding that honesty mattered more than safety. I'm not going to pretend I handled it perfectly. I sat in that parking garage for a long time before I could move. I was angry, and I let myself be angry, and then I had to make a choice about what I was going to do with it. I could have walked back into that room and made Eleanor feel small for something she had carried alone through her whole adult life, something that had happened to her before she ever knew my name, or I could try to understand it. Understanding took more out of me than the anger did. Anger is easy. It sits right on the surface. Understanding requires you to actually think, to put yourself in another person's position, to ask what you would have done at 19 with no money and no support and a family making decisions for you. I don't know what I would have done. I genuinely don't. And once I admitted that, the anger didn't have as much to stand on. What I know is this: Eleanor didn't give Vanessa up because she didn't love her. She gave her up because she was alone and scared, and the people around her had more power than she did. And then she spent 40 years quietly wondering. That kind of endurance, living with a grief that you can't even name to the person sleeping beside you, that takes something I don't have a simple word for. It's not stubbornness. It's not silence. It's a kind of strength that wears you down from the inside, slowly, and you keep going anyway. Vanessa has that same quality. 3 hours from Indianapolis, a paper bag in both hands, stopping outside a hospital room door because she couldn't remember a single thing she had prepared to say. She came anyway. That's the whole thing, really. She was terrified, and she came anyway. I'm 63 years old, and I thought I knew my wife. I knew her crossword habits, and her toast, and her laugh, and the way she cried at commercials. I knew 31 years of a person. And it turns out a person is bigger than 31 years. That used to feel like something I had missed. Now it just feels like more of her to know. The table has one more chair at it now. I'm going to teach her husband about football, whether he likes it or not. And Eleanor burns the toast every single morning, same as always, and nobody says a word about it. Some things you hold on to. Some things you finally let go. The hard part is knowing which is which and having the honesty to face it when you get it wrong.